Hello everybody, and welcome to the global launch of the Singapore FinTech Festival and the Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology.
Last year, our event was at Jewel in Singapore, but sadly, a lot has changed since then. This year, we've revised our format and we've created this beautiful studio, and we're going to be live streaming to over 5,500 people spread across 87 countries across the entire planet.
We wanted to take this opportunity to update you on our plans for this year. It's been obvious for a little while that we wouldn't be able to welcome 60,000 people in person in Singapore this year, but we're really excited to share our new global approach, particularly at a time like this where we all need to come together and support each other.
I couldn't agree more. And we have a jam-packed 2 hours of great content for everyone today. It's going to be 4 industry sessions with speakers joining in this very studio, as well as speakers being streamed in from across the entire world. We have speakers coming in from the USA, from Nigeria, from India, and the Philippines, and that's just to name a few.
But to kick off, I am delighted to welcome in this very studio, MD Ravi Menon from the Monetary Authority of Singapore, Chairman Peter Ong from Enterprise Singapore, who will be sharing more about the format for this year and what we have planned. They'll be interviewed by Manisha Tank from Money FM. So I'll hand straight over to you, Manisha. Thank you for joining us today.
Becca, Pat, thanks so much for that. And wonderful to see you both, Ravi, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manisha.
I have to say my heart was pumping when I saw the video. I'm really excited about this big unveil that we're doing today, and we're going to talk later about what you can expect in terms of everything happening later this year. But first of all, how have you both been? There are some people who just want a refund on 2020. Ravi, how have you been?
No, I'm having a really good time. It's quite a bad thing to say, actually, given what's going on in the rest of the world. But personally, it's been great working from home. It's been wonderful. And it's a very different kind of life, something I'd never expected.
It really is. It's making us all think about things slightly differently, isn't it? Peter, you were saying your children are grown up enough to not be the ones creeping into the shot when you're doing things from home.
Well, it's work from home for me too, and zero travel, so that's a blessing.
Yeah, certainly. Now, look, one of the things we're going to discuss this morning, today, is people and talent. It's going to be a big theme that we're going to touch on. But before we get there, I want to ask you both a little bit about what you were like when you were young boys. Ravi, when you were younger, what did you aspire to be?
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer. And when I was young, well, I still am. When I was younger, I used to read very widely, all kinds of books. 1984, George Orwell was a favorite.
Oh, wow.
And I was thrilled by the way he uses his words. The Tao of Physics, Fritjof Capra, City of Joy, Dominic Lapierre, Free to Choose, Milton Friedman. That's when I got derailed from writing to become an economist. Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda. I was really thrilled at how words are used to evoke emotions, provoke thinking, and how the arrangement is such an original creation of the person writing it. So I've always enjoyed doing that. And I wrote short stories and poems. But as you can see, I didn't quite achieve my childhood ambition.
Oh, you've achieved plenty of other things.
Oh, well.
So, then there was me thinking at the age of 3, I wanted to be the MD of MAS.
Oh, yeah.
Peter, what about you?
Well, I have to go back to high school. I was on the school debating team, and we did win the national competition.
Of course.
So I thought I could be on the winning side of an argument. And so I thought maybe I'll study law and maybe become a litigator. And then at the ripe old age of 19, I showed up before the Public Service Commission. Now, the Public Service Commission in Singapore is the entity that awards scholarships to graduating high school students. So the chairman interviewed me and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Maybe I'd like to be a lawyer." He said, "I tell you what, you go study economics." And well, my life circumstances then were such that in order to have an overseas education, I had to take up the scholarship. And I went off to study economics, came back, joined the public service, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, and here you are now. And the point of having this conversation is because this is a big theme. We're talking about people and we're talking about talent. I want to bring that up with you first of all, Ravi, because the idea is to honor talent development and also focus on individuals. I know that's been a big focus for you.
Yeah. Well, each year, like I said, we do have a theme for the festival, and an SFF switch. And this year is people and talent. And I thought it was most appropriate because 2020 is going to go down in history as the year of the pandemic. And the human cost is tragic. The economic cost is widespread. But I think the story will not be complete if we also did not tell the story of the people. People who exhibited great courage, resilience, and creativity in the face of adversity, who found solutions to how life can carry on, how societies can continue to function. I thought that was quite inspiring. And innovation and creativity played a big part in all of this, alongside courage and resilience, of course. And the SFF switch is really a celebration of that. It's a celebration of innovation. It's a celebration of creativity. And we wanted to focus on that. So we will showcase the trailblazers who made a big difference, who changed things in the world of technology and finance. The rising new stars who could potentially change the world of tomorrow in a post-pandemic world. And also honor everyone else, part of the ecosystem who made this work. So we're going to focus also, and people and talent, I think, are also going to be critical in addressing 5 challenges that we want the FinTech Festival to address. And we've structured the festival around these five global challenges. So each day we will have a summit dedicated to one of these challenges. It's a 5-day-long event. And on the first day, the festival will focus on responding to the pandemic and emerging from the pandemic. So that will be your pandemic summit, if you will. And then we'll talk about creating the digital infrastructure of the future, which would be at the infrastructure summit. And then the third item would be to enhance sustainability and inclusion, which we will have under the impact summit. And it's also critical to restore investors' confidence in the future. Yeah. We need to invest for the future. And Investor Summit does that. And last, to build skills for the future. The future is going to be very different. We need very different skill sets to do that. And the Talent Summit addresses a key issue in the tech area, which is about building skills so that we're digitally ready for a digital future.
Yep. We're all having to go through this as well. And I think for the first time in a long time, we find ourselves all on the same page in a way.
The same screen, if you will.
Absolutely. Peter, let me take it to you because I want to see the perspective from the side of Switch. You've got to address a new normal here. How do you do that?
Well, even last year, pre-COVID, people and talent was uppermost on our minds because the kind of ecosystem that we were going to develop, tech ecosystem, needs to take into account that Singapore only has a small population, 5.5 million people. So this ecosystem is not going to be one with an abundance of scientists, engineers, and coders. It has to be a compact, but well connected to the external environment and a highly collaborative ecosystem. But now, this year, fast forward this year, with COVID, this theme of people and talent takes on special significance for at least 2 reasons. One is that amidst the dismal outlook, there are still bright spots in terms of job opportunities in the digital and tech sector. And secondly, this is an excellent opportunity for us to profile the results of innovation of working in the new normal. And therefore, Switch takes on special significance, and we want Switch to be the platform to profile the issues of people and talent, and also how we can operate in the new normal. So Switch will be organized along 3 tracks with 2 signature events, but on the 3 tracks, the first one is, as I said, on people, it's the community track. And then we will profile Asian founders and business leaders. We will profile women in tech, and celebrate the resilience and the grit that comes with adversity that they've gone through. The second track is the sector track. And by sector, I mean the industry sectors which mirror the key sectors in our economy where there's greatest development potential. And what are they? Health and biomed and health sciences, urban solutions and digital economy, trade and connectivity, agri-food technology. And so there are some of these sectors that we will profile over many conferences. And the third track that we're going to do is really a track on technology. And here we're talking about cross-cutting technology that applies across all different industries, like robotics, AI, blockchain, 5G, quantum computing. Besides these three tracks, we will have two signature events. One is what we call Slingshot. Slingshot is a global startup competition. Our fourth edition will be done this year. Last year, we had about 2,400 startups competing. And this year, the application is still open till September. We have close to about 2,000 applicants, and I expect in the last few weeks, many more will come through. And Slingshot will have two new features this year. One is a separate stream to create competition along operating in a new normal. And the second stream really has to do with the corporate innovation platform, where we invite corporates to interact with the startups, and they will have an opportunity to interact with the top 500 startups from our Slingshot competition. The second event is Tech Innovation, which is really technology to industry matching, where we, through open innovation, try to match the seekers of technology and the producers of technology.
You know, I have to ask, I'm curious, was there ever a point earlier this year where you thought, wait a second, how are we going to do this? Because, you know, it's all very hands-on with Switch, and I'm sure there's, you know, the festival has become so famous and it's been very popular with these young startups, right? Some of them may be thinking, how on earth would I get involved with this? Was there ever a point where you were a bit worried, like, how are we going to manage this?
Well, I think COVID really gave us an opportunity to redefine how we would do the event. I mean, last year we had, as Ravi said earlier, 60,000 participants. We had 1,000 combined, the FinTech Festival and Switch, 1,000 exhibitors. We had about 570 speakers, 50 innovation lab crawls. We obviously cannot have such a big congregation of people here in Singapore. So it gave us a chance to redefine. And I think what we're hoping to do this year is a combination of both the physical and the virtual.
On that note, there will be people listening right now who are thinking, okay, this is great, but how on earth are you going to pull this off? Ravi, it falls to you to explain, how is this festival going to work this year?
Right. So as Peter said, the great thing about the FinTech Festival is it's a platform for connectivity. It's a platform for networking and collaboration. It's not an event. So we started scratching our heads, how we're going to recreate that, right? It's very easy to go digital. And so we came up with this idea of a hybrid event, which combines both digital and physical experiences. Physical experiences, we've said, if we can't congregate 60,000 people in one place, can we congregate 60,000 people in different places around the world? And so we started exploring a network of partnerships with other cities so that this becomes cities in the world. And then to overlay a digital experience, because what brings it together is a digital platform. And so to create what we call an online city, which all these physical cities will be connected to, and they get to hear speakers, they get to participate in panel discussions, they get to look at the exhibits of people from thousands of miles away on what we call the online city, which is really a digital platform, 24 hours over 5 days. And we're even thinking of having discussions across time zones stitched up so that people, if you want to really stay up the whole day, you could. The festival will last right through the day.
Well, I'm sure the content will be good enough that will be happening.
Yes, and the content will be. We've got very good, very promising responses from all those we spoke to. So it's an exciting idea. It's a first of its kind. continuous round the clock, combining both digital and physical experiences.
Well, it sounds really exciting. Peter, I'm wondering from your perspective, I always sensed that Switch was very hands-on. So how do you get past that?
Well, we told ourselves that people really want to attend this or participate in this because they want to meet people. And so we felt that one way to do this, building on the platform idea, was to also power the platform through AI. And that allows anyone who's put in his profile to be able to know who they can meet. It's really hands-on, as you say. And tying up different partners on the part of Switch, we are going to leverage on the 35 offices that Enterprise Singapore has all around the world, and the 13 Global Innovation Alliance partners in 13 different cities, in 13 different innovation nodes around the world, to have physical events. But they are all live streamed onto the virtual platform. So for example, if you're a participant from Latin America, and there is a physical event going on in Zhongguancun in Beijing, which is the Silicon Valley of China, you will be able to participate from the comfort of your home or office in Latin America, the actual event going on in Zhongguancun, and connect with people. So it's going to be very hands-on across time zones. So what we're hoping to achieve is a very global feel, a very engaging feel, but an easy one, so that everyone can feel they can participate.
Oh, so you can really evoke some local connectivity with all of these partners. And I guess that applies for both aspects of the festival, right?
Yes, yes. So the beauty of having these distributed physical events in various cities is that each of those events would have a local flavor that would be particularly appealing to the people of that country or region. At the same time, through the digital platform, there is global connectivity. Actually, when we think about it again, we were wondering, why do we have to wait till COVID to think of something like this?
But this is true. So I'm just wondering whether this could be a model that we use again in the future in different ways. But just to clarify and to get a real handle on how this is going to work. Let's say, you know, I'm in Germany, for example, and I want to be a part of this. And Peter, you were kind of explaining the similar thing, that you can check in almost with an event that's going on halfway around the world. And I like this point that you're making, Ravi, that actually, why did we have to wait for adversity before we could do this? How are you both feeling about this? It sounds pretty exciting to me, Ravi.
Well, it is. And this would be a grand experiment, actually, on a global scale. To see how this works. Digital platforms are not new, and we could talk about it later. There are lots of digital platforms that you get onto and help to connect to people you've never seen or heard of at all. And that's what brings the world closer together. And here we'll have a live demonstration of that. A big part of the FinTech Festival was the exhibitions where the, especially entrepreneurs and startups, for them, they don't have big advertising money or marketing campaigns. And so they need to demonstrate their solutions, and the people coming through the booths are the main way of doing it. So in this way, actually, they can theoretically reach out to a much larger audience, because if there are going to be 60,000 or we hope 100,000 people connected to the platform, checking in, that's a wonderful way to sell what you have, sell your solutions. And there are also people looking for solutions who would go onto these platforms and advertise and ask, do you have a solution for this problem? So I think there's a great way to bring people together, bring problems and solutions together, and also for people to have one-on-one discussions. So we'll make provisions for that in the platform so that they can carry on their networking offline on their own.
It sounds like a colossal enterprise, but Peter, I mean, perhaps it's the wrong metaphor, but it almost feels like fintech startup dating is possible.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm very excited. But I think we will also be learning a lot, because as we provide the platform and offer the menu of both physical and virtual activities, people will behave, and through their sort of mass behaviors, we can learn what people like to do, and and then make it even easier for them to do whatever it is they like to do, which we sitting here cannot even imagine. So I think it will be a journey of discovery for all of us, and we look forward to working very closely with our partners to discover what is it that will maximize the experience for all participants.
That's actually a very interesting idea that you've picked up on, and you alluded to this before, that actually this whole experience with COVID-19 has opened up some opportunities. I'm sure you found that very much to be the case.
Absolutely. Digitalization, that's a big word, but it's really been one of the biggest beneficiaries from COVID. We've been giving speeches, we've been giving a lot of government support schemes to encourage companies to digitalize. Well, COVID just was the largest unplanned impetus for digitalization. For example, we started a scheme called Grow Digital. This was before COVID in November last year, basically to help small companies, first time, wanting to sell overseas through B2B or B2C platform. And they could do it without the need to do a lot of these ancillary services like payments or last mile fulfillment, because an intermediary will do it for them. And when COVID struck, we had 1,400 of our companies sign on in very short time, because they knew that they had to ramp up very quickly and adapt and adjust and diversify into markets which hopefully were still open at that time. And that was something which we learned, and that was something the enterprises themselves learned. And that was a great journey. And I look forward to many more such discoveries, because you never know where new innovations can come from. Give you another example. Strato, they do dental devices through 3D printing. But because of circuit breaker and lockdown, no dental services could be provided. And immediately they pivoted using 3D printing to make medical devices. So face shields, swabs, they were able to use that same technology and platform, and now they are able to meet very fast growing demand in that sector.
Yeah, it's been incredible how many companies have managed to do that, to pivot from one thing to another in a way that it can help with that fight, if you like, with COVID. On that note, Ravi, one of the things that in our day-to-day, not just here in Singapore, but all over the world, and this is a small example, is cashless payments, making it easy for no contact. That's just one small innovation that has just had to rapidly transition in a lot of places. But so far as banking goes, we're seeing it right across the spectrum, aren't we? This resilience.
Exactly. And financial services in particular has been doing pretty well because it was able to function and carry on because most of its functions were digital. And I think and it runs a full gamut of the things that financial institutions do. So electronic payments, which is already becoming very popular, has taken off spectacularly during the COVID pandemic. And one can't just imagine if we did not have electronic payments, if we did not have online delivery services, how would we have gotten through this? So it's amazing that the infrastructure that was put in place has served us so well. And it's not just e-payments, it's also online banking, because you don't want to go to the branch, but you need to carry out the transactions. A lot more people have gone on to digital banking. You can now open a bank account in Singapore in just a few minutes without stepping into a branch from the comfort of your home, with full due diligence done because of MyInfo, where you can actually authorize the bank to have access to your data, which is verifiable, sitting on government data sources, but you hold the key and they can do a verification and open an account. You can also do an account opening through facial recognition and other biometrics. So I think these changes are in some ways irreversible. I don't think many of us are going to go back to using checks, writing checks, or walking into a bank branch to carry out any transactions, because most of that can be done online now. But I think beyond that, we are seeing bigger changes in how the financial services industry is operating. I think especially with 5G technology coming on board, it's going to completely transform financial services. It's already been transformed by digital technologies, but this is going to make it even bigger. This will make augmented reality a reality, where you can have a lot more interactive banking services.
Yep.
Because today the choice is either you want to talk to a live person across a branch, a teller, a counter, or you go onto a screen and it's very impersonal. We're looking at a world where actually you can combine the two and actually talk to a live person, but it doesn't have to be in a physical premise. And you get the comfort as well as the convenience of being able to connect with people who can offer you financial advice not limited to your geographical region. And I think that those kinds of changes are coming, where banks will be able to provide services anywhere to anyone, anytime.
That more of that hybrid reality that we've already been talking about. Ravi, just however, on that subject, you spoke about data just a short while ago. Are there any issues here for regulators? What sort of things are regulators having to focus on?
Yeah, so here is the dilemma with data. Aggregating data, sharing data, and analyzing that data yields tremendous insights, which you can then use for the greater good of society to serve individuals' customized needs and draw insights that can inform policy, that can inform strategy, and so on, product design, for instance. At the same time, a lot of data is personal, and there are very legitimate concerns about privacy and confidentiality. There are also concerns about security, meaning I don't mind my data being used by party A for purpose B, but how do I know that it's not being used by somebody else or it's not being hacked? So I think this is the great dilemma we're facing in data. The answer does not lie in data localization or non-sharing or building firewalls around it, nor does it lie in making it so widely available that people don't feel comfortable or confident that they are being well served and there's room for exploitation. So we want to avoid data monopolization. We want to avoid data segmentation. I think one of the central challenges for governments anywhere in the world is to find that balance for achieving good data governance. It's a subject that I think not many people have started to think about. In Europe, I think they have. And here in Singapore, we pay a lot of attention to it. That if you don't get this right, if people don't have the confidence that the data is well protected and used for the purposes for which it is purported to be used, they're going to lose confidence. And you lose a social license for using data in a socially redemptive way, which I think data has a lot of potential to do. On the subject of data, I should also add the other dimension that's missing, and we are working quite hard at it, is data connectivity across countries.
Yep.
Data needs to not just flow from one place to another. It needs to flow across borders because global businesses are operating across borders. Global financial institutions, for instance, if we wanted to detect potential fraud or money laundering, you need to pull data from all the markets that you're operating in and analyze that and discover patterns that you would not be able to discern if you're only looking at isolated chunks. Same applies for risk management. What are your exposures like? What are your market risks like? All this requires data to be consolidated.
Yep. Yep.
And that means we need protocols, connectivity agreements, as we do in trade for goods and services, for data to flow between two countries. What are the protocols that ensure security, privacy, and speed and efficiency?
On that kind of thing, I'm sure, Peter, that comes up a lot when you're talking to startups or you're thinking about all these cross-border connections, right?
Most definitely. I mean, just as financial institutions need volumes and volumes of data, enterprises require data to understand their markets, their customer segmentation. Deep tech companies, those that do very advanced scientific R&D, need to do a lot of randomized trials. So they need to collect lots and lots of data and use them in an intelligent way. So it goes back to the point about people and talent again, getting the right people and talent to make sense of the data scientists, data analysts. I think that's going to be a major investment that Singapore definitely would be putting a lot of resources into.
Well, Peter, you very gracefully brought us full circle there, because we just have a couple of minutes left before I hand back to Becca and Pat. And before we do, I want to get your elevator pitch, but I promise you it can be more than 30 seconds, for getting people to come and join in later this year for the festival. Peter, you first.
Well, this is a global platform where everyone can come on board and contribute your ideas and network. And this is a combination of both physical and virtual activities for you to do from the comfort of your home or your office, to connect and to interact and transact. So we hope to see you there as we profile people and talent out of Asia, for Asia, out of Singapore. Thank you very much.
You could even do it in your pajamas, can't you, Ravi?
Well, I've always believed fintech was about innovation, inclusion, and inspiration. And this year's event, the way we are conceiving it, hits all three buttons very strongly. It is, of course, innovative. It could, as you said earlier on, change the way events like this are organized in future. It's a grand experiment. It is inclusive because more than any other event now, we're able to draw in and include in this platform people from all over the world, thousands of miles apart, who would not otherwise have joined this enterprise. And it's inspiring because I think by bringing innovators together and getting the creative juices flowing and exchanging ideas and networking and investing for the future, we can create a better world and emerge stronger from this crisis.
So we know it's going to be online, it's going to be live. Remind us when, remind us how many days.
Right, it's from the 7th of December to the 11th of December, over 5 days. Because this is an exceptional event, we've shifted from the usual November window. Next year, we'll be back in November, but for this year, mark the date, 7 to 11 December 2020.
It's great. Well, we're all very excited. Thank you both for that and running us through everything that we can expect later this year. Ravi Menon, MD at MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, and Chairman of Enterprise Singapore, Peter Ong. Thank you both so much. Now I'm going to hand back to the real pros.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manisha. Thank you to the writer, to the debater. Now that we've heard more about the event format and the topics that we'll be covering this year, I hope this helps to articulate the hybrid model that we're going for, particularly how the content will be broadcast 24 hours a day across those 5 days. And I'll be asking for feedback from our panel of industry experts later today. But up first, my co-host Pat has the opportunity to interview the co-founder and executive vice chairman of Alibaba Group, as well as Mike Milken, the philanthropist and founder of the Milken Institute. So join us for the next half an hour to learn more about entrepreneurship, about job transformation, and about the role of the financial system and how it can play a role in helping society get back on its feet. So over to you, Pat.
Thanks for joining us, and a big warm welcome to Mike and Joe. So MAS has been partnering with the Milken Institute for a number of years now, most notably the Milken Institute's prestigious Asia Summit. So Mike, it's great to have you involved today, and thanks for joining us. I've heard that as a child you had ambitions to be an astronaut. Is that true?
I had ambitions to run the space program. When you look at the stars, you realize that there is no other planet like Earth in our solar system, and maybe 4 million light years away, you'll find a planet at the next star. And that was kind of my mission. If we wanted humans to survive and our life to survive, I felt it was important someday to find another planet for us to go to. And I wrote a letter when I was 11 years old to the President of the United States, letting him know I wanted to run our space program. I had never missed a math or science problem. Unfortunately, I didn't have a response from the president. Maybe the fact that I told him I understood space travel from reading comic books hurt my chances.
So what would you say, Mike, are the key inflection points in your childhood that kind of led to where you are today?
It was really in 1969. I met a young African-American man who told me he wouldn't have access to capital because of his race. There was an event that occurred in Los Angeles on August 11th, which became known as the Watts Riots. And I had met this man the next day, and my belief in the American dream, that's America with a small a, an opportunity to succeed based on your ability, not whether you're a man or a woman, your religion, your race, where you grew up, who your parents were, where you went to school. And now at 19 years old, I discovered there was another factor, and that factor was access to financial capital to build your business. So I went back to the University of California, Berkeley, changed my major to finance, began to study, and my goal was to democratize capital and make it available to millions of small businesses to grow.
That's a fantastic story, and thanks for sharing that. And so, just to move on, Joe. So, you know, your achievements and contributions to the world have also been immense, and it's a real pleasure to have you involved. So we've heard from Mike the astronaut. So, as a child, what were your ambitions, and what did you aspire to be when you were growing up?
Well, my childhood was definitely not as ambitious as Mike's. Mike wanted to explore space and become an astronaut and do very big things. And what happened to me was my parents sent me away to school thousands of miles away from Taiwan, where I was born and raised. I was 13 years old, and I went to the United States to boarding school. I was a kid that grew up in a Chinese language environment. I went to Chinese school. I barely spoke English. And then I landed in this strange environment, boarding school in the United States in the East Coast, kind of a preppy environment. And really what I aspired to be was just to be one of the guys, to have people like me because I looked different. I dressed differently, didn't speak a lot of English. So I got into a lot of sports. I played American football. I tried out for baseball, got cut. Then I tried lacrosse. I also got cut from the swimming team. It's really a trial and error, but really it was a part of getting acclimated to an environment and getting the guys around me to accept me. And that was my biggest aspiration. I want to be accepted. And I think, as Mike has referred to, a big challenge in today's society is you could be discriminated against because you look different. And those that have been discriminated against try very, very hard to blend in, to be part of society, to be part of mainstream society. And this is what we see in today's society, where I believe the mainstream are not as sensitive to those that are trying very hard to be part of them, and maybe resistant. So a lot less ambitious than Mike.
But certainly very persistent, I think, which certainly shines through. And just wanted to pick up quickly around, you know, your role as executive vice chairman. It seems to be quite an all-encompassing role. Can you kind of tell us what your daily routine looks like and how things are going at the moment?
Well, right now, my role at Alibaba is to look at the investments that we make, because I sit on the investment committees of both Alibaba Group and Financial. So from a day-to-day standpoint, I talk to our investment team, I talk to the other members of our investment committee, and that's kind of the role. But I'm basically, because I'm in Hong Kong right now, we're basically working from home. Over the last few weeks, we've had a spike of cases. So the government has acted very quickly to come down, and now all the restaurants are closed. So for us, it's really, you know, for the last several months, we've been getting used to remote work, being able to get on the video calls with colleagues. Is actually, you know, a big convenience. Because normally we would have to travel to Hangzhou, where, you know, I travel between the US and Asia quite a bit. And you just realize that you are wasting a lot of time on the road. And being in one place, and also just being able to get on the video call very quickly with your colleagues, actually makes you closer to the people that you work with. So I think that's actually quite nice.
That's good to hear. And so we'll be covering a little bit around healthcare and the current kind of challenges as well as hope later on in the session. But each year, I kind of want to segue onto each year that we have a theme and a real cause that we champion and advance. And so from financial inclusion in our first year to sustainability last year, and this year we started thinking about our cause, and it was a no-brainer that we had to focus on people and talent. and to provide the support for the rising stars who will hopefully go on and heal the world, or ideally change the world, and to help people that have gone through some really tough times by driving forward talent development, reskilling and upskilling. And so Mike, I just want to see from your perspective, what do you see as some of the major shifts occurring in the future of work and the types of skill sets required?
Well, the major shifts in work were in place long before the coronavirus hit. And they are the deployment of technology and the fact that the use of technology will leverage your abilities. So it's a question of knowledge that you have. So education, access to education anywhere in the world, access to healthcare anywhere in the world, access to financial knowledge anywhere in the world. And so these skills become more important. The percentage of the world's economy that's digitized goes up every day. And so it's software that's moving the world and knowledge. And so the skills are available. This coronavirus over the first half of 2020 has only accelerated and challenged this. And when you think about human capital, a close friend of mine who unfortunately passed away in 2014, and I began reading his work in 1966, Gary Becker, won a Nobel Prize for the concept that 75% of all the real assets in the world were the productivity of individuals. Later work has actually increased it more. And so you might want to accomplish something, but do you have the talent in your team to be able to do that? And constant re-education and upskilling, as you pointed it out. As some jobs are eliminated, others are created. And so societies today throughout the world have to create an opportunity for people to have constant learning. The idea that you're going to have one job or one career in your life is no longer a reality. You'll have multiple. And I'm sure in 20 years, the jobs that have been created, many of those companies and jobs don't exist today. But knowledge in agriculture, for example, with vertical farming, being able to use 1% of the water and 1% of the land will transform parts of the world who were worried about food security into being able to grow their own food from that standpoint. So these skills and education is freedom. One of the great challenges we have in the world is in sub-Saharan Africa and other emerging parts of the world, there will be billions of more individuals that are born. Every day in the world, there's about 400,000 to 450,000 children born. What are the jobs? What are the skills? What are their opportunities? And to me, it all starts with education as a fundamental roadblock and identifying what those jobs will be. In many ways, we have been introduced what I think is the future of this century, and that's the century of bioscience. And bioscience is more than your health. It's food, it's water, it's energy, it's air quality, and unfortunately, it's also defense. So I think getting people prepared for these jobs and having the knowledge to take advantage of these jobs, but it's somewhat the responsibility of companies to constantly create an opportunity of upskilling for their employees so that they can grow as the company grows.
No, thanks for sharing that, Mike. And Joe, what do you see as, what needs to happen to support people during these massive shifts from your vantage point?
Well, I think it's a whole society approach, from individual small owners of businesses to larger companies to government. When I observe what's happened to work during the coronavirus environment, is that our idea of working from home, it's very nice. We all have video uplinks and access to the internet, but most of the world is actually not like that. The whole idea of work from home is actually quite a elite white collar concept. Think about this. when the economy is shut down, your service economy, you can't go to the barber, you can't go to the restaurant. The transportation in the city is not running. Think of those jobs. Are those guys working from home? Absolutely not. They're not serving anybody, and they're out of jobs. So we could sort of sit in our own cocoon and think about, oh, gee, I could work in the office, I could work from home, but there's a big part of the economy that can't work from home, and we'll have to figure out a way to be supported. And the other observation I make about the COVID situation is that what we used to think as those take for granted jobs, the people that you never pay attention to and they just sort of happen, now have become essential workers. The bus driver, the hospital worker, the policeman, that's keeping our neighborhood safe. So what happens to these people, right? And they've been, and so as we look back, we feel that there's a big part of the population whose safety net is inadequate, and it would take a whole of society approach. Fundamentally, I don't believe in people being out of jobs, sitting at home and just collecting checks, because there's a sense of self-worth that you have to have. People need to go back to work, but how do we create the environment, create the possibility and the positions that will get people back to work? I think in the future, there's going to be a whole slew of service-related jobs that will be open. If you're doing gym work from home, you're trying to exercise from home. Well, there needs to be a gym instructor at the other end of the video that could be hundreds of miles away. So how do we think about all of these new scenarios that will create new service jobs? Because we think, I think the service economy is really the future for most of the economy. As we see in China, a lot of manufacturing jobs have been lost over the last 5 to 10 years, but shifting to the service jobs. The service economy will employ a lot more people than manufacturing, as manufacturing gets replaced from robots. So I think we need to think about creating those jobs, and also making sure that what we used to take for granted as those take for granted workers, how to make sure that they're safe, that there's a safety net for them.
To build maybe for a moment on what Joe has said, those important jobs today also include the people that are in the fields picking vegetables or fruit to allow people to have access to food, the checker in a grocery store where they're physically going in and getting food. And I think you're going to see a substantial movement here to increase minimum wage in the United States and other places with the appreciation of the importance of the job. And I know in my own community, we have residents that go out and clap and cheer when the delivery driver comes and thanking them for bringing the essentials to their homes. And that's something they would have never done before. But I think this is a very important period for those that Joe talked about, service workers in restaurants or hotels that aren't working at the moment, to increase their knowledge and education skills and the ability to go online and access knowledge today that might provide for upskilling. There are a number of companies that have told their employees, even if we're not open, we're going to continue to pay you from a safety net here. But at the same point, let's see if we can get you upskilled to a better job in the future. And so technology is going to play an important role, but education determines the productivity of people and society. And I think this is in a period where people should all be focused on, can they increase their skills? If not in person, online.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's good to see, some of the topics that you guys have just picked up on now, that humanity is beginning to shine through. I think I'd like to kind of stick with the transformation kind of theme and move on to the digital space. And clearly the acceleration of digital technologies is having a profound impact on pretty much every industry in the world. And so, Joe, can you share a little bit more about what you're seeing and the impact that these changes are having on consumers and businesses?
Well, I think the last 6 months, when the whole world is suffering from COVID, we've seen an acceleration of digitization. So in every aspect of life, what you would expect to be digitized over the next 3 years have been forward accelerated to the most recent few months. So the digitization of going into a store shopping is going online. The digitization of going to restaurants is food delivery. And the digitization of live entertainment is going online into watching Netflix films. And for young kids, it's playing online videos. So over the last, I saw a data point that's very interesting. Over the last quarter, the number of hours that kids watch other kids play games. So this is like esports on Twitch, which is an esports platform, and also on YouTube, was 6.5 billion hours. If you took the adult or the male population in the United States, because I assume mostly are young males watching other kids play esports, between the age of 10 and 25, there's about 30 million kids, young boys or young men. That's 6.5 billion hours, means on the average, every person watches 2.5 hours of other kids playing games. So this is massive digitization. But the other aspect of digitization is actually quite scary. It is the digitization of the person, your personal data, right? The government tries to contact trace, tries to control the spread of the virus. The starting point is very benign, but what ends up happening is your identity and your behavior, which used to be offline, is now being digitized and being tracked. I'm not trying to scare people, but also I'm not trying to predict what the implications of all those things are. Some are good, and some may be bad.
And what are your views on that, Mike, and in terms of what you're seeing in the US from digital transformation? What are some of the trends that you're seeing on top of what Joe's just mentioned?
Well, let's start with finance. It's changing the world. The most valuable financial institution at the moment in the world is Visa. And the second most in the United States, depending on the day, is MasterCard. And if you take a company like PayPal today, PayPal is more valuable than a company like Goldman Sachs and Citibank put together. So I think for everyone focused on finance, from that standpoint, as Joe is focused on separating a financial company to the public, fintech an opportunity, but it also is a fantastic opportunity for the emerging developing markets where your bank is on your mobile device. And as many people are aware, when people started getting paid on their mobile device in countries in Africa, they thought they had a 20 or 30% increase in pay because the middleman or the foreman who took a percentage was gone. In terms of education, there's a whole revolution of knowledge available to you. Maybe the greatest transformation will be in healthcare. The largest files, as you might be able to find your doctor, is not even located in the same country you are as you download vital information that someone analyzes. So, and lastly, as Joe's pointed out, entertainment and media is being transformed, and particularly the opportunity for an interactive media where the person is not passive, as Joe talked about in video games or in esports, etc. So technology affords these. Joe's raised the concern of our freedoms, our independence, and whether the book 1984 is coming alive and has been accelerated because of our effort of tracing people today and trying to control the spread of COVID-19. But all technologies has pluses and minuses associated with it. But for most of the people in the world today, in spite of COVID-19, today is the best day they've ever known. Access to power in their mobile phone and a charger in the sun using solar. And so I see technology as an enabler. And most of your emerging markets or developing markets will bypass what has occurred. I don't see the creation of physical banks that existed, and then I see it going digital and having people access. And this digital will also provide capital to small and micro businesses throughout the world, as it already is doing, because they have a lot of data to make a decision on whether to loan you money or not. And so I see these micro loans. The transaction costs are so high, and they're pretty much eliminated in a digital world. So these small and medium businesses, which grow into large businesses over time, I see young tech entrepreneurs having an enormous opportunity to change the world for a better. And whether it's in the environment, alternative energy, electric cars, finance, healthcare, education, or media, I think we've only begun to see these changes occur.
Yeah, I think you've hit upon some great points there, in particular around making finance inclusive, and hopefully we're beginning to see that around the world. But I think you know, what it's going to rely a lot on is entrepreneurship. And so while it's been a tough time for entrepreneurs around the world, you know, we're beginning to see the resilience of founders really shining through. And so, you know, valuations seem to have bounced back in the US and other parts of the world, in fintech in particular, while Singapore has recorded, you know, 650 million in fintech fundraising in the first half of this year, which is a big increase on the previous year. But, you know, there are some challenges, because starting out as an entrepreneur in today's climate, you know, is simply not going to be easy. And so, Joe, you know, I've got a question here around, you know, you've experienced a great deal on your entrepreneurial journey. You know, there's a certain story of your trip to Hangzhou in the early days of Alibaba, in which involved 15 shoes and apparently 15 toothbrushes. I think that springs to mind. And what advice can you give to entrepreneurs that are starting out in the current climate?
I think that the basic skill set of an entrepreneur, it's really part of the DNA of building a business, is about building a team. So in today's environment, I actually think it's a pretty good opportunity for entrepreneurs to look around them, to reach across to maybe some of the other companies that are, you know, can't take on more people. So the talent is now widely available, and trying to identify talent and bring them from the outside and partner with them, I think is a very important thing for the entrepreneurs to look at. I think this is a terrific opportunity, because a lot of people are looking for work, looking for a new situation. This is a point of transition for a lot of people, and people that used to not be able to recruit may be willing to listen to you now.
And I suppose transitions always create opportunities. So your message is for entrepreneurs to find the right people around them. And Mike, from your experience, you know, you've been involved in a number of initiatives and businesses. And what advice would you like to give to some of the entrepreneurs that are just starting out and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their career?
I think one of the keys today that's so different, if I lived in Singapore, my market is not 6 or 7 million people in Singapore, or even the people in Malaysia. Technology, my market is the world. So everyone in the world is potentially my customer digitally from that standpoint. I think a lot of people from small countries often think about their own country and size of its economy. Obviously, I'm speaking to you from the United States today, and Joe is speaking to you from Hong Kong, but Alibaba's headquartered in China, Hangzhou, and I had the honor to go and visit last year. But You can do business anywhere in the world from Singapore, a kind of continent of Australia that seems far away from everyone. The speed of moving digital information, you could be next door. So I think the first thing for an entrepreneur is to understand the scalability of their business and understanding what markets they're appealing to. I think the challenge of digitization of everything is to understand, can your business be disintermediated by technology? What are you offering? What is the value? And as we started this conversation, Joe has underlined it, the most important factor is your team, the people. It makes up most of your assets, and the dislocations that have occurred in the United States, out of 15.5 small businesses, micro businesses, you had 3 to 4 million already go out of business. Now, they could have been restaurants and other things that required physical interaction. But you have a lot of talent and entrepreneurial talent available today because of these changes that have occurred. But I think I would just stress, think of your business as to who you're serving. And the needs are so significant in so many fields. What is the value added you're providing today? And digitization of some sort, with computers 1 million times faster and 7 million more or 8 million mobile phones existing today on the planet and access throughout the world. There's opportunities that you never have before. So if you're opening a product or a store, you don't have to just have customers next door. And the infrastructure that's been built, whether it's in China with Alibaba's ability to deliver, or Amazon or other companies around the world, or Coupon in South Korea, the whole distribution chain has changed dramatically. And before you might build a brand for 30 or 40 years, there's a way today to introduce a new brand in a very short period of time. So I would say to you, today is probably the best time to be an entrepreneur someplace in the world. And what better place than to be in Singapore?
Fantastic. That's a great message, and a real message of hope for entrepreneurs out there that are on the beginning of their journey, which is an exciting time. There's no doubt about that. But lastly, Mike, I'd kind of like to touch upon some of the great work that the Milken Institute is doing to support advancements for cures and treatments for COVID-19 around the world. And, can you share some hope with the audience today?
In many ways, I think we'll all be judged on what we did during this period of time and whether we deployed our talents. So beginning on February 20th, we reoriented all 10 centers in the Milken Institute, our family foundation, our medical foundations, to focus on the COVID crisis. And some of those are financial safety nets, economic safety nets from that standpoint. There are over 450 between 190 plus vaccines, antivirals, antibodies, immunology agents. And the cooperation between for-profit and nonprofit and the sharing of data is greater than I've ever seen in the 50 years that I've worked in the field of medical research. There are 18 or more vaccines that have already gone into human beings. Companies like Moderna is now in phase 3. Governments have stepped forward. In the United States, there's an agency called BARDA. It's part of Health and Human Services, and they've put up billions of dollars to help build manufacturing and to have people make products before they know that have worked. This is the first time really in history. So hundreds of millions of doses of vaccines will be available. And countries around the world are grappling with the idea that if a vaccine does appear to be useful and successful, how do we get it to the citizens of the world? How is it distributed? So those issues are already been addressed. It was our feeling that the cost to the US alone was $1 trillion a month of this coronavirus. So investing 5 or 10 billion to build manufacturing plants or to produce product that might never be used is a very small amount. And I think every day there's probably a new vaccine. So the world, I think, should feel optimistic today. Just to give you an example, Johnson & Johnson, I had done a podcast with Alex Gorski. This is the most valuable healthcare company in the world. And they announced that they would hope their vaccine would go into human beings in January of 21. It went into human beings in July of 20. In just 3 months, it was accelerated from 9 months to 3 months, and it's already going into individuals and looks very promising. So whether it's antivirals, whether it's antibodies, whether it's immunology agents, there are so many things that work today that stop the cytokine storm, the overgeneration of your immune system. All cancer immunology drugs have had to deal with that. So that is not going to be a solution for the virus, but it's a solution to prevent maybe anyone dying or going to your lungs. So you can always go to milkeninstitute.org and look at all the 450 things that are moving along, and we update them every day. And I think the world has come together on this issue, and almost every country in the world is affected by it. So I couldn't be more optimistic that we will actually have a vaccine in human beings in 2020, not 21, that works.
That's fantastic. And thank you for giving us hope. And it's great to see humanity shining through. I think that's all we've got time for at the moment. And I just want to say, thank you very much, Joe, for making the time, and Mike as well for sharing some hope with our audience today. And I hope, again, that we get to see each other in person in the future. Thank you very much.
And so without further ado, let's kick off the first session at the Switch breakout session today. And this is titled The COVID-19 Pandemic. Undoubtedly, one of the strongest, yet unplanned driving forces behind many companies' digitalization strategies, especially for those in the travel industry. And today we're so happy to have with us Ms. Jane Jie Sun, the CEO of Trip.com Group. And she's here to share her insights on digitalization in the new normal. Trip.com is one of the largest online travel agencies in Asia. But against the backdrop of this pandemic, how has Trip.com continued to connect people with some of the best destinations around the world? Well, Jane, it's over to you.
Hello, distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share my view on the topic of digitalization as the new normal. In the recent years, Singapore is one of the countries which has gained international recognition for its efforts in pushing forward the digitalization. Singapore's investment in digitalization in recent years is the key to country's success in tackling the pandemic. I'm very impressed that the government launched specific websites such as Mask, Go Wear, and Support Go Wear websites, which serve as a guide for citizens. COVID-19 has hit many industries, including the travel industry, which contributes more than 10% of its GDP and job opportunities worldwide. Trip.com Group has seen strong indications of an industry well under the way for its revitalization. Take, for an example, the recent May Day holiday in China. Statistics indicated that more than 110 million trips were made over the holiday period, bringing more than 47 billion RMB in travel revenue. We anticipate that this trend will continue and the consumption will grow in stages as regions become more able to open for travel. As one of the regions to control the outbreak and undergo a domestic travel revitalization, China is likely to become the first regions to emerge from the outbound travel tourism market. Trip.com Group has also launched several initiatives, including the Travel On campaign, which brings together industry partners and destinations to provide discounts and flexibility for its booking, as well as a standardized guarantee for cancellation, sanitation, and safety. And our series of live stream broadcasts with a recent one in Singapore is one of the new digital platforms we're using to achieve our goals. Trip.com Group is confident about the strong recovery, and we are working closely with our industry and destination partners to make this a reality. Trip.com Group has always placed our customers' interest at the heart of what we do, and we are constantly challenging ourselves to identify new and innovative ways to drive customers' experience through new digital transformation. This is why our management places a strong emphasis on identifying and grooming talents for our offshore markets. We're constantly on lookout for talents who are nimble and able to adapt to changes in digital and technology processes. As we continue to grow our industry and international business, recruiting local talents in each market, including Singapore, is very important for us. Therefore, we have invested much time and efforts in identifying, bringing on board, and training our team in these offshore markets, so to understand the local talents and the local markets and the culture, and are able to leverage the power of the digitalization to create and enhance our product offerings that meet the challenge and the requirement of our local customers. In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic will change the way business operates, as well as the behaviors of citizens around the world. Digitalization is not only a new concept, but more business today to recognize the value of increased digitalization. It is important for governments and business to work together, accelerate their nationwide digitalization efforts to ensure their country emerge stronger post-COVID-19, with Singapore being a great role model in this aspect. On the final note, Singapore will celebrate its 55th birthday this weekend, and I would like to take this opportunity to wish all Singaporeans a very happy national holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, for sharing your thoughts with us today. I know many around the world miss traveling, and it's great to hear as well what Trip.com is doing to appease that little bit of wanderlust in us. Now let's move on to our next topic for this afternoon, and this one is titled Gazing into the Deep Engineering Crystal Ball. Well, this session is supposed to offer us a peek into the fascinating future of the deep tech startup ecosystems, and it's brought to you by IEEE, otherwise known as the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineer. Speaking at this session is Miss Kelly Hoey. She's the author of Build Your Dream Network. Now, Kelly has been lauded by Forbes as one of the 5 women changing the landscape of venture capital and entrepreneurship. EBW 2020, that's an organization otherwise known as Empowering a Billion Women. Well, that organization has included her in their list of 100 most influential global leaders empowering women worldwide. Moderating this session is Ms. Randy Sumner. She's the Senior Director of Strategy and Entrepreneurship at IEEE. And this session will explore the opportunity spaces that allow companies to continue to innovate, while at the same time bridging the gap between deep tech and the human experience. It's going to be a fascinating one. Over to you, ladies.
I'm Randy Sumner, and I'm so excited to be here with Kelly Hoey. Kelly, it's been several years since we shared a stage together, and there is so much to talk about in the world of serial entrepreneurship, investment, and most importantly for us, what's happening in the world in relation to the company that you launched in that in-between time, Build Your Dream Network. So please, Kelly, tell us a little bit about your take on the opportunities that businesses, startup, and technology organizations have because of this disruption that's happened to all of us.
Oh yeah, and it's so good to see you, Randy. I know we're not on the stage in Pittsburgh, but this will do. Well, I think this is, you know what? This is a horrifying time, but it is also a really interesting and exciting time. I think what we're realizing right now is, the technology we've been playing around on the edges of, that's like our uses of it are accelerating, but we're also realizing like how important people are. And I think we're longing for those human experiences. So for me right now, what I'm looking at is how are we using technology to create better human experiences? How are we using technology to facilitate the human experience? How can we do things so that we as human beings can connect? Because, for some people, I mean, we can't wait to get on an airplane and travel again. And other people, I think they've just said, that's enough. I'm not going to do that anymore. But we need these two things. I'm going to say humanity and technology. We need innovation to bridge those and improve the experience and accessibility for all of us.
So let's talk a little bit about the technology, and then we can talk about the human interaction as part of that. So my first thought is, what are some of the technology, instead of talking about platforms or tools like the one that we're on right now, but the actual things like AV, VR, what are the opportunities that you see that will help people connect and will help businesses thrive?
Well, I think, this is such a great question. And one of the things I'm thinking about right now is like the whole retail disruption and the consumer journey that is, there's no consumer funnel now, as, my friend Tara Hunt would say. It's just like this, messy, convoluted consumer journey that between research and social media and this experience that we maybe used to go into the stores for, but now we need to have some other way. And, one of the areas which I think, I sort of think about companies and they should be learning from is like the beauty industry. Because the beauty industry has been using, I want to say sort of virtual reality. Like I remember going into Nordstrom's and trying on lipsticks without trying on lipsticks because of the technology. How can other companies learn from that and say, right, what's our consumer journey? How can we give people this experience? So now in an era where we may be a little bit sort of phobic about, buying something, how can I try something on without trying it on? How can it work for me in a, how can I see it and experience in a virtual reality way? Or how could I, through virtual reality, navigate my way through a space before I physically have to go through that space, so I know where, so to speak, the touch points are. So how can we learn from that? So I think companies that have been reticent to try these things now need to go and say, right, I don't need to see that kind of, I want to say that the way some companies have been about, are my competitors using this? It's like, no, go look at other industries who are wholly embracing AR and VR and say, right, what are they doing? And how does that relate to my customer? The service I do, what can we do? And, if you don't have the research and development department, you don't have the innovators, like go and work with startups, go and try some of these companies who are doing interesting things and collaborate and partner and see what's possible. Because I think it's one of those things, Randy, if 2-3 years from now we were sitting here having this conversation again, we could probably have a laundry list of the companies that no longer exist because they haven't innovated. And I think, it's sort of like innovate or you're going to go the way of the dinosaur, pure and simple.
Right. And that might be about finding ways to innovate internally with the team of people that you have right now, or it might be going after those startups and pulling them into the conversation, as you said, looking at what are the products and services that are out there that are utilizing this as an opportunity, and focusing on disruption for growth chances as opposed to getting all afraid and pulling back.
Right. Like,
so
who's your customer and how are they living their lives? Who are you serving? I mean, think about your own life, what you're doing. And, so how are you having that? I mean, it sounds stupid to say this in this day and age, but you still go to websites, on your mobile device that are the clunkiest thing you've ever, it's like, come on, like we're beyond.
And I think we are absolutely seeing it. So there was a news story very recently about, for instance, Eastman Kodak, the core company that started film developing and 35 millimeter, completely changing. Of course, it went bankrupt, but it's coming back again in this era of COVID and rebranding itself as a chemical company, which is what it always was. It was just a chemical company about film, and instead now a chemical company producing devices and systems that will help fight COVID. So, what are some other lessons like that you've seen in recent media?
But Kodak is such a brilliant example. Here was one of an iconic brand, one of the most valued brands, and they considered themselves one thing back in the day. They thought of themselves as one thing. We are a film company. What happens if they thought of themselves as a memory company? What happens if they thought of themselves in a different way? They could have been the ones inventing Instagram instead of Instagram inventing Instagram. Correct. But they were so siloed and limited. And, it's unfortunate that, I would say that loss of brand value, there's a name and iconic status, but they were, maybe they got too cozy, maybe they got too comfy. But I think it's a great lesson that you can, I want to say resurrect a brand, you can reinvent, correct. But why don't you try and sit back and think bigger about what you are? I mean, they could still be what they are today, a chemical company in that regard. But they also could have been the inventors of Instagram. They could have been also inventors of a whole lot of other things in our era where they could have been the leaders on visual search instead of Pinterest.
So the lesson is think outside the box, challenge yourself. Right? Challenge yourself. What's the opportunity space? Go talk to startup CEOs, go talk to your peers, talk to the lowest folks on the totem pole in your company, and ask them, what's their personal experience. So let's transition a little bit to people, because this is really what we're really talking about at its core. How do we provide value for our customers? How do we ensure that our people that are working with us and for us are excited about the work that we're doing, that believe that it's going to last through this disruption and scale perhaps instead of dwindle? So what are some of your thoughts on the things that employers need to do, especially technology companies, to rise to this challenge?
Well, I mean, you go back to Kodak, and it's a great example. And I think you need to, technology companies, whether you're a little company or a big company, you need to look around and see who's around the table and who's bringing the ideas to the table and who's, suggesting ideas, who's amplifying ideas, and who's, vetoing ideas. If you're sitting around a table with a bunch of people who look like you, think like you, you're not getting the best ideas. You're not don't add on innovation as an afterthought in terms of innovation of who is bringing the ideas and the suggestions and the solutions. Don't add on, we should have a woman on our board because, our product's for females. Come on. In this day and age, there's no excuse not to have the strongest, most diverse team around the table. You're going to have better products and services. You're not going to have these blind spots. You're not going to end up in this echo chamber. So I think it's incumbent on every single company. And I'm to get excited about this topic. This is me speaking as an investor. I want the best return on my investment. And I'm only going to get that if you've got diversity around the management team, you've got diversity around the board team, and you've got diversity within your company.
So let's talk about what diversity actually means, right? Because there's diversity, equity, inclusion in both your board and the companies that you want to invest in, as well as in how you focus on your potential customer base. So I know one of the things that you and I have talked about is this fact that technology companies need to think about how do they deliver to that diverse audience that might not be abled exactly the same as them, that might, be neurodiverse, that might need other tools than, the ones that we're using right now to talk to each other. So can we talk a little bit about your thoughts on the vision for the future of what they need to do to stay successful?
Well, I think it's this idea that they can't just say we had a focus group. I think you've got to spend the time and the effort to find, I want to say, the people for your team who maybe are living and breathing the experience. And I'm thinking of a pitch event I was at and I was judging, and someone was creating a technology for the visually impaired. And they said that, like the founder, volunteered and read to blind children or, something like that. And that's where the idea came from. And my only question to them is, who on your team is blind? And they're like, well, no, but the founder. I'm like, time out, like, end of discussion. I don't need to hear any more. I'm not interested anymore in this technology because you haven't spent the time and the effort. So I think you have to challenge yourself to say there's no one out. If you say there's no one out there, you're not looking hard enough. I think if you're not, also expanding your mind on who is the possibility of who would be good on your team, right? So look at your job descriptions, think about what you're hiring for, and whether you now have pigeonholed yourself. And by pigeonholing yourself, you're not producing the greatest product. I think of a head of technology, it was at Bank of America, and she told the story of being young in her career and needing to mentor a military vet. And she was young in your career and she was probably thinking, oh God, I'm the woman, they're getting me to do the mentoring. And this guy, he had nerve damage in his arms from his service. And she's like, oh, and he can't code as fast. And the language that goes in our brain, like, you burden me and you need to produce this. And it ends up, she said, at the end of the day, she said, I realized he was a better coder than me. Because what I coded in 200 lines, he coded in 20 because he needed to think more and create more beautiful, productive code because he couldn't code as fast. So we need to think about what and who is productive. And how are we measuring productivity? And how are we looking at creativity? So for everything from, your hiring interviews and what you're asking people to do, particularly technologists, and say, hold on a minute here. We're assuming 200 lines of code is productive. Maybe 20 is, and maybe we should look at this differently.
I want to kind of circle back to IEEE and to Switch for a moment, because one of the things that we're looking at for this particular audience is, a wide range of technology people in all sectors. And that the idea of disruption in people is part of this Switch conversation and engineering at its core with IEEE. So what are some last kind of messages that you want to make sure they take home about what you see as the future, not just right now in this diverse, decentralized, all at home, but what's some of the opportunity space that they're going to be seeing in 6 months or a year, and you as an investor are thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the possibilities are really endless right now. And the things I look at really, Randy, are how is technology improving our human experience? How are you doing things that are bringing people together, not driving us apart? How are you creating products that have people and I want to say community at the core, and not using technology as some sort of a substitute for our human need to connect meaningfully to each other? So I'd say to people, think about how, we always wonder, being my little take my investor hat off and put my networking hat on.
I was just going to say, the Build Your Dream Network is important here.
But also, so much with networking, we're always, in people networking, the networking I primarily talk about, we're always wondering and we're always worried about how we're entering conversations. And what I want to challenge everyone now with your technology, with your human interactions, ask yourself, am I bringing people into the conversation? And if I'm not, then what am I going to do about it?
Right.
There's my big challenge.
It's like it's the business equivalent of not living your life in a solo environment, right? You know,
Right.
don't allow the departments in your company to not interact with each other. The
Right.
same thing, don't allow the people to not talk about the future together, because
Right.
we have to constantly build that conversation, whether you're a tiny startup or whether you're a large multinational company.
Right.
Any last words of wisdom before we tie this up and talk about the December event?
You know, I think we've touched on it, and you know what? This is where global organizations like the IEEE are so valuable, because you have such a broad and diverse audience and membership, and people should be leveraging those kind of and I would say events like this one, where you have the opportunity to connect with so many different people and take advantage of every single tool you can to do that.
Kelly, as always, thank you for giving your outlook on the future. You yourself are a disruptor with Build Your Dream Network, with every company you've ever touched, and certainly with the engineering-driven community with IEEE, you've been a helper and a support. I've been really happy to talk to you today a little bit about the future of technology and the Switch event, and I look forward to talking to you again in the next couple of months. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Randy and Kelly, thank you for an unforgettable session. It was a pleasure to hear from you both. I especially liked what Kelly said about how now is the time to create and invest in technology that brings people together, especially in a time of massive disruption. So well said, that one. Now, before we move on, I'd like to share a short video on Slingshot, Enterprise Singapore's global startup tech pitching competition. Now, this will be held virtually at SFF and Switch 2020. And we like to encourage all startups to participate and pitch to leading industry players, global investors, as well as partners. The world is your target. Calls for entry are now open till the 7th of September. And here's a short video to tell you more. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is Slingshot in a nutshell. We had 2,400 participants last year, and we're looking forward to having even more tech startups pitch and participate this year. Well, if you've just joined us, a very warm welcome. My name is Yvonne Chan, and I'm your host here this afternoon at the Switch Breakout Sessions, where we get to hear from the top minds and leaders from the global tech ecosystems. Now, if you have any questions for us at all today, please do connect with us via our website at sffxswitch.com. We'd be happy to hear from you. And now let's move on to our next panel discussion. And for this one, we've got a star-studded lineup of leaders from the Singapore and tech ecosystems globally. They're here to discuss how, why, and where businesses have changed dramatically as a result of COVID-19. Moderating this session is Ms. Maria Lee, the COO of Tech in Asia, and joining her are our panelists, Dr. Peter Nagler, the Chief Innovation Officer at A-Star, Mr. Magnus Grimeland, the CEO and founder of Antler, and Ms. Christine Tsai, the CEO and founding partner of 500 Startups. It's over to you, Maria.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on Beyond COVID-19, a new era for the global tech ecosystem. Like many other industries, the global tech sector has been shaken up by the events of 2020. However, the economic impact of COVID-19 feels like it's hitting the startup scene particularly hard, given that the typical MO of startups is to invest into its tech product and growth at the beginning, while relying on VC funding and relatively short runways to help achieve that growth. This formula has been challenged in these times of economic uncertainty and changing consumer behaviors. My name is Maria Lee. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Tech in Asia, one of the leading digital media publications covering Asia's tech and startup scene. I'll be helping to dive into this topic a little bit more deeply today as we learn from our esteemed speakers. So let me please introduce Dr. Peter Nagler, the Chief Innovation Officer of A-Star, Magnus Grimeland, the founder and CEO of Antler, and Christine Tsai, CEO and founding partner of 500 Startups. Hi guys, welcome. Thanks so much for joining today. So let's jump in. A lot has been said about COVID-19 already, obviously. And so in your opinion, what have been some of the biggest and most lasting impacts that we'll see in your respective areas? So Christine and Magnus, maybe if you can speak to the startup scene, specifically based on funding and runways and what we can expect from founders.
Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be here. So I think what we have been seeing, and you know, from the start of COVID all the way till now, there's definitely been quite a lot of change going on in the world around us. But when we think about specifically what founders are seeing at the early stage, and for us, that's where we typically invest. That could be anything from pre-seed all the way up to through their Series A. A lot of startups at the very beginning of COVID, when it started to accelerate, there was definitely a lot of triaging going on all around. A lot of the advice that we gave to our companies, and I'm sure other early stage investors were giving to their portfolio companies, was to really make sure that you look at the cash in the bank, because we just don't know what's going to happen, certainly from funding standpoint, but also just from actual business standpoint. As we've seen, a lot of sectors were really just obliterated in some ways, and some are on the opposite end of the spectrum and accelerating. They're seeing a lot of tailwinds, but there definitely was a conservation of cash mentality. In terms of whether we wanted companies, we were recommending companies raise money or not, really dependent on, the sector, the stage, kind of their cash in the bank. But definitely companies are still raising money. We've still been making deals and making investments, but clearly depending on the company and of course the environment, there's definitely a change in terms of terms that we've seen, simply because of the environment.
Magnus, any thoughts as to how founders are starting to react differently or treat their product and growth differently as a result of this situation?
I think there's two things that we see. So first, on the portfolio side, we made about 70 investments throughout this pandemic. We made about 20 of them here in Singapore, because there's just a ton of opportunities for great founders and exceptional people to go out there and solve new problems and take advantage of new opportunities. And since we help founders build companies from scratch, obviously we can influence the business models that they end up building. And we've seen kind of a decade's worth of change in a lot of industries happening in only a few months. Recently within edtech, within supply chain, within e-commerce, within logistics, within health tech. So we've actually seen a rather kind of large increase in activity within specific areas, and I've been able to invest in 70 new companies over the last 5-6 months, and the majority of them here in Singapore. So very excited about that. Now in terms of the existing portfolio, where we have about now 190 companies, we've seen 1 out of 3 things. So either they were lucky with their business model in a way, meaning that they are in those spaces that have grown incredibly fast and they're just dealing with increased demand and this incredibly kind of rapid growth within the sector that they're in. Or they might be on the other side of the spectrum, which means that they lost 98% of their revenue, right? So we have companies like this as well in our portfolio, in which case the focus has been very much on, as Christina mentioned, ensuring that they have the right runway, ensuring that they put more time into the product, can get people a little bit to create revenue where possible. What we've seen in that end of the spectrum is that the best teams that are working on things that still really make sense, they are still performing incredibly well in the way that they can get the capital that they need, and they have the perseverance. But the companies, a few companies there actually, will not succeed. But I think that just kind of speeds up an existing situation, meaning that, they wouldn't have succeeded anyway. It just moves a little bit faster. So you have those two effects. And then of course there are the ones in between all of this, right? So I think net, the there's a tremendous amount of opportunities out there right now, and I think in the early stage startup ecosystem we operate, it's actually somewhat kind of counter-cyclical in that respect, that we haven't seen the same kind of hard effect that you've seen in the later stage part of the economy.
Yeah, definitely. Peter, let me bring you into the conversation. Obviously, I think public and private sector alike were unprepared for the extent of COVID-19. And so from your position at A-Star as the Chief Innovation Officer, what are you seeing in terms of like rethinking or a mentality shift for public-private sector partnerships or like additional tech innovation opportunities that the government can help source out?
Yeah, Maria, I think public-private partnerships will play an ever-increasing role. I mean, we have a lot of examples of them already, and specifically at A-Star, we might even have a big institute, which is a public-private partnership, a bit more focused on the manufacturing sector. But while I believe being responsible for innovation and having done so for many, many years, also in the industry before joining A-Star, I'm a firm believer of partnerships anyway to drive innovation. But I think maybe in these difficult times, like Magnus mentioned, some startup companies might see severe constraints in cash flows. And I think public-private partnerships can definitely help out. But demands, of course, from both sides that they are understanding what each other side needs, so clear expectation management, having the same goals, and understanding maybe the different ways these organizations, big public organization, and let me say a smaller type of highly flexible startup typically works. So this has to be matched well. But I think don't want to say the one cannot without the other, but I think we will all be better off and much faster in finding solutions to many, many demanding problems. And we probably see many, many more coming up in the post-COVID times. Yeah? So I'm a firm believer we have to strengthen these kind of partnerships. We have to clearly set goals. We have to prioritize in what we want to do first, and then take it from there. But for me, it's no-go not doing it.
All right, so tech, of course, and we're talking about the global tech ecosystem today, is a really interesting sector because it's so woven into, every aspect of our life now. And Christina, as you mentioned earlier, some parts of the global tech scene have seen headwinds, but many others have actually seen tailwinds, such as ed tech, remote working tools such as Zoom, and we're seeing a lot of growth as well. So let's look at some of the bright spots and talk about some of the positive things that we should be looking forward to. So are y'all seeing any early signs of recovery, whether in specific regions or in verticals within the tech and startup scene?
Well, we're really looking at, in terms of verticals and sectors that are impacted by COVID, and that applies to probably pretty much every sector. It's more, as you say, they fall into two categories. They're either what we're calling the new normal. So these are largely industries that are seeing headwinds, like they already were struggling pre-COVID, and now it's just amplified. Versus the other category, which we're calling, we're at 500, we're calling the accelerated future. So the ones that are seeing tailwinds, that they probably already were on the path to, they were already on the path in terms of adoption, but COVID, obviously out of kind of necessity, has really accelerated their adoption and impact because there's been a need for it. So in terms of the latter category, the accelerated future, a lot of this is really around areas where there's been that need, right? So healthcare is definitely one that has come to mind, especially around digital services. This is things like telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, and even areas that were maybe not necessarily related to anything that was maybe perceived as a need, but that's really changing. Things around like mindfulness, behavioral health, because as we've seen, there's been so much impact caused by COVID in terms of that level of stress, and those types of things are getting much more use. So those are all things that were, existed before COVID, but in terms of the healthcare sector, especially here in the US, adopting things like telemedicine, those things being covered, probably definitely a very painful path. And we're seeing this with a lot of sectors, like especially healthcare. It's not known as a fast moving, industry that adopts technology very quickly. There's just a lot of regulatory hurdles to overcome. But with COVID, now we're seeing a huge demand from our portfolio companies that do remote patient monitoring or have something to do with digital health and giving consumers better access and doctors safer tools to be able to treat patients. So that's definitely an area. As you mentioned earlier, almost everybody is, at least here in the US, is sheltering in place, remote work, either for the long term or temporarily. There have been a lot of these tech companies here in Silicon Valley that have announced that they're doing remote work either permanently or through 2021. Google announced that just recently, that would extend through next year. So the need for remote work tools, and that has so many implications, but productivity tools, a lot of those companies, definitely in our portfolio and what we're seeing out in the market, have seen huge demand. Education, both for tools for teachers and schools, as well as just direct consumer education tools, also seeing huge tailwinds, benefiting from huge tailwinds, because now there is a demand for education, particularly around maybe things like career changing, building new skills. So many people are out of work and laid off. So the demand to build up their skill set is there. And then finally, a couple other areas. We're seeing a lot, obviously, with entertainment media in terms of how that content is consumed and distributed, probably much to the chagrin of the industries and the production industry. But there's definitely a lot of increase in consumption with things like esports, online media, digital events, things like what were primarily in-person live events now being forced to try to innovate to bring a live streaming experience. And then logistics and supply chain, certainly there's a lot of demand all the way from kind of daily household, grocery delivery, all the way to just the overall supply chain, especially cross-border. So those are definitely areas where we're seeing a lot of activity and frankly, a lot of opportunity from an investment perspective.
Yeah, definitely a total shift in how we live and work, if you will. So Peter, Christine mentioned, a number of different sectors. Specifically, when it comes to actual tech innovation and product innovation, are there any emerging opportunities that you're keeping an eye on, or things that you think will be particularly promising and pick up traction during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Christina mentioned a lot, but fortunately for investment, there are some more. And let me maybe bring the attention to a more, call it a material, physical space. Yeah, even after COVID, one of the big challenges of mankind is still climate change, is environmental issues, and we have to solve that problem. And if some of you read the latest reports and how this might be developing, is not at all reassuring. So if you look at all the, let me say, CO2 abatement, how making processes greener and so on, there is a lot to do. And for that, we also need new methodologies of doing that. And increasingly also in these areas, we simply have to use data. We have to digitalize processes. Yeah? And this will, I think, offer ample ways where people can interact and can develop new things. Also, if you look, maybe even driven more by the COVID situation, how can laboratories be automized? I mean, there is talks about the lights out laboratory. That means no people in and everything is done by a robot. I don't see that happen pretty soon. And I firmly believe that specifically in science, human interaction is a key driving factor. And of course, a lot, like Christine mentioned, can be done, and we have learned to do it virtually. I still firmly believe it cannot only be done virtually, because I think all our experience, if this was, let me say, a live physical event, how would we interact in the coffee breaks? How would we interact in the evenings? Yeah? How many ideas would we spark in this very moment? This kind of collisions, I think, is unplanned collisions, is for me a decisive factor in innovation. So, but nevertheless, we'll see a change how these things run. And I personally experienced a lot of new tools when I had virtual post-its and so on instead of the real post-its. It's a great experience, and in a way I enjoy. But I think there has to be some direct interaction. But in all this high automation, using data generally in science, the great topic of sustainability, talk about recycling. How do we at all, let me say, collect waste material, and how do we sort it so that we can recycle it? Yeah, this needs still a lot of innovation and a lot of new ideas. We haven't found a way to do it yet. So there's ample room for any inventor. Keep on inventing. Yeah, lots of things to do.
Definitely true. Magnus, so what is your outlook on potential, M&A opportunities, funding changes that will affect the startup ecosystem going forward?
Also, I think what both Peter and Christine said is spot on, right? There's a number of new opportunities, but I also like what Dr. Peter mentioned around the existing problems still being out there, right? So there's, there's a tendency whenever there is big change that everyone runs on the kind of new opportunities, but we also need to remember that there are some pretty big ones that currently exist. So I think, I very strongly support what both of the former panelists said. So, if you fundamentally look at this, it's the best time kind of ever to innovate still, right? From a fundamental perspective. Globalization has never been at the level where it was before. The bad side of the globalization we saw with the pandemic, meaning, the spread of a virus to all across the globe, causing havoc in people's lives in a short period of time. The positive side of the globalization for startups is that you can acquire 50 million customers in 14 days, right? I mean, that's what happened with Pokemon Go. It took the airline industry 68 years to get 50 million customers. And it's the same within, the whole B2B space, the whole B2C space. You can literally acquire customers now all across the globe in an incredibly short period of time. So that's number one, which means that actually you can do that almost within any industry. The second part for me is the cost of building a business is lower than ever, right? You can prototype hardware. You can do, with A-Star, they do a tremendous amount of really great deep tech stuff, which you can get, lab on demand. You have workspaces that work as labs, like all those things that would have cost you like $10 million in the past. You can reduce down to a serviceable monthly cost, right? So the cost of building businesses is smaller than ever. The third aspect is disruption is happening at the scale which we've never seen before. The Fortune 500 companies, they used to be at this index for 50 years. Now the world's biggest companies remain so for about 12 years. You've seen this kind of maturation of kind of 10 to 12 technologies happening at the same time, instead of 100 years being affected by one technological change. Biotechnology, genome technology, AI, IoT, a number of these things that have been in the lab up until now make itself into the world, disrupting so many different industries. So, if you take all of those forces put together, and all the opportunities that is there to disrupt, the current environment and the current pandemic won't affect that opportunity long term. And so if you look at Antler, we are continuing to invest across all industries. One of the other things that happened with this pandemic, I think, is some of the world's most exceptional people have been sitting at home. And in times of great change and in times of great uncertainty, you start thinking about what do you want to spend the rest of your life doing? Do I want to spend that time moving money from A to B? Or do I want to spend that time making this large corporate even better? Or do I want to spend that time going out there and disrupting and innovating and doing something that makes the world a better place? And I think you will see a lot of people making that change in the same way as they did during the financial crisis, right? I mean, the great thing with the financial crisis was very bad for a lot of people, but the great thing about it is that some of the world's smartest people stopped managing other people's money. Physicists, mathematicians, the best people, the best scientists out there was on Wall Street moving zeros and ones around. And they chose, okay, hey, now I'm going to go and disrupt something and use my knowledge to create a better future. And I think the same thing is happening now. And we see that in our application numbers for Antler, where actually pre-COVID, we had a peak in applications and then it went down, and now it's higher than ever. And I think that's just due to exceptional people wanting to do something great with their life. And that's kind of working with people like Christine and Dr. Peter to drive real change.
Couldn't agree more, and looking very forward, obviously, to this next wave of innovation, if you will. So Peter, let's end with you here. Obviously, I think one thing that's happened in 2020 is that the COVID situation has certainly shown a light on all the different parts of the system that were broken, especially kind of when it came to tech product, innovation, research funding, and things like that. So what are you looking forward to or particularly optimistic about as like additional investment into the tech ecosystem or like potential breakthroughs that can help address some of the critical societal issues that Christina and Magnus both mentioned?
Yeah, first I think the most important intervention we will have to do is dealing much better with the mute and unmute button in these virtual times. Actually, I'm optimistic. Maybe naturally I'm optimistic, and now being here in Singapore, and when we hear the statements clearly of the Singapore government that they want to continue to invest in innovation and drive research, drive development of the country, society and economy, I think this is the right way to go. I think we have to be, in a way, organizations, governments have to be courageous. One of the very few Chinese words I've picked up is the Chinese word for crisis, which is Wei Ji. My Chinese friends apologize for the wrong pronunciation probably, but it's actually a combination of risk and opportunity. Yeah? And in every crisis, there's a big opportunity, but we have to seize it. And as we said, I couldn't agree to more to what Christine and Magnus have said. So I think we will go on, we will continue, yeah? And we have new challenges, we have the old unsolved challenges, so we have to move. There is no way out. Of course, now we have some short-term things to do, help people who are in trouble now due to the crisis and so on. There are big societal issues which we have to solve, and as Christine has mentioned some of them. And yeah, there are some also, like in every crisis, there are signs that things are not so good as they should be. And it should be an opportunity to change for the better. And maybe the last comment, yes, there will be, for me, a bigger drive in anything which is related to data and virtual activities, but I would like to come back to, there is still a human interaction needed. There is also, beyond the digital and virtual world, there is a physical world. We don't eat digits. Yeah, so we have to talk about how we feed 9 to 10 billion people, yeah? How we make life more sustainable on Earth, how we go along with our scarce resources and so on. There is a lot on the deep tech or material side which needs real innovative and good solutions. And A-Star, where I'm currently now, I think can serve as a makerspace. It can help startups come to us, please ask us if we have the equipment, the technologies to support your business, and I will take it from there. And at the same time, as a research and technology organization, we will help to drive also that innovation. And I mean, also in COVID times, you might have heard of some of the examples where ASA was quite good actually in these test kits and so on. So again, last word, there is great room for innovation and big opportunities. Let's seize them.
Awesome. A very inspiring and human note to end on. So to all of our speakers, thank you so much for your time and insights today. To everyone at home, thanks for joining this session. Hope to see you at this year's Switch conference, where you can learn a lot more about these amazing opportunities and tech innovations that were discussed today. So thank you, everyone. Please take care.
Thank you, Maria, and a big thank you to all our panelists for that thoughtful and engaging discussion. I think there were many key messages that were spelt out during that panel discussion, and one that would certainly resonate with a lot of future tech startups was the one from Dr. Peter Nagler, where he said there's still plenty of room for innovation and invention, so keep on inventing. All right, now at SFF and Switch this year, we are spotlighting people and talent. And this afternoon, we want to celebrate the spirit of founders, specifically two Singaporean tech startup founders who have made waves in the local and global scene thanks to their innovative and entrepreneurial spirits. Now, the first of which is Miss Feng Ru Lin, the CEO and founder of Turtle Tree Labs, and she's made waves by looking to generate milk from stem cells. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Darius Chung, the CEO and founder of 99.co, one of Asia's fastest growing property portals that has totally reinvented the way people discover great properties online. Now, both of them have overcome tremendous challenges in their paths to success, and we're so excited to hear from them today. Moderating this session is Ms. Robin Tan, the Managing Director of KR Asia. Let's give them a warm welcome.
I guess for me, resilience is being able to preempt and plan. It's really important to be able to identify or see what potential risks that could come ahead in the future and preempt them. And I do that with my team a lot. We run a lot of simulations, a lot of strategy sessions to make sure that we're kept abreast of anything that comes along. And I guess second is reiterating, it's very important for startups to continue to reinvent ourselves. I guess if you look at, say, Jeff Bezos, he's always changing the direction of Amazon to fit the needs of his customers. And this is something that is super important.
Darius, what do you think?
Sure. We actually like the word relentlessness a bit more than resilience, which is actually one of our 6 company values. Relentlessness, or it's actually on our voice. It has a definition, which is that without abatement of strength or pace. But the way we explain it is very simple, meaning that perseverance is essentially like a cockroach, right? Like you cannot die. You always survive no matter what. People nuke you, they step on you, no matter how, you will still survive. But that's not good enough because cockroaches don't do great things. So we explain it's not so much cockroach. Relentless is not cockroach, but rocky. Rocky is no matter how many times people beat you, you still get up, and then you punch back at the same strength as much as you can get up. So I think it's easy to kind of if get beaten down and kind of come back up, but it's much harder to come back up with the same level of motivation. I think that's what we like more. Yeah.
I'm very curious what are the other 5 values on your company wall.
Happy to share it another time.
Okay. So I think, what I'm curious about is, I don't think that resilience is a value that we need to have now because of COVID, but more of resilience is something that a founder must have if he or she is thinking of going on to starting a new business or entrepreneurship as a whole, right? So since you both have been in the startup industry for a while, what were some of your experiences that helped you both define resilience?
So Darius can start now.
Okay, I can go first.
Sure.
To be fair, right? Sure. I think for me, past experience that defines resilience. I suppose this is my second real startup. I've spent more than 6 years on this one already. My last startup, I ran it for 5 years. We almost ran out of money 3 times, like within 2 weeks of running out of money. Right, it's like 2 weeks to payroll, and we have no idea how to meet it. Type of situations. I think having gone through that really puts it in perspective, or help me kind of prepare that any situation can happen. Like if you're 2 weeks away from being able to make payroll and you have to tell all your guys that, well, sorry, you're not getting salary today, or you are gone, our company is gone. So I think that really helped prepares one for any situation, to be honest. Yeah, that was my experience.
Robin looks like she has something to say.
No, I'm just curious, right? Like, who saved you? Like, how did you save yourself? On the last?
Yeah. All 3 times, all different. But that's an interesting question because this is also where I've learned to define my own version of what real angel investor is. Right? Like today, angel investor means people who write small checks. My definition of angel investor is somebody who will help you and try to save you from the brink of destruction, even though they know they might not get the money back. meaning that the
Literally.
purpose is greater than returns ROI. So I think that's what the literal definition of angel investor is. So I think 2 out of the 3 times we actually say by angel investor that say that, well, I'll loan you the money. And we try very hard to convince him that we have this contract coming in, he's going to pay, and we're going to be able to pay him back. And but there is at least a 50% likelihood, all things considered, that he might lose his money, but he gave it to us anyway. So
Nice.
I think that's, yeah, that was, and by the way, this is Prof Wong Po Kam. You guys might know him.
Oh, Prof Wong. Wow. Okay,
He was
okay.
the first angel investor. He was the guy who saved us. Yeah.
I see.
Wow.
Wow, literally
Kudos to
an angel.
that.
What about you,
Yeah.
Peng Ru?
For me, resilience in terms of, especially for Turtle Tree, because we're quite a young company. So what we do is we try to learn as much as we can in every meeting, in every engagement with partners, with customers. And my co-founder and I, because we talk to other founders a lot, we want to brainstorm and learn from each other. So what we do is we tend to go through our business plans, we pitch to each other, we try to understand what their go-to-market is. And through this rounds and rounds of iterations and talking through each of the businesses, we learn a lot, and we try to preempt any challenges ahead. I haven't had a time when I cannot pay my guys yet, but when that day comes, I'll have a different story to tell as well.
Okay, I kind of hope that day doesn't come. Okay.
This resilience will fight through.
Yeah, no, but in research, you need a lot of that, right? I think resilience is not so much of, you need to have failure or on the brink of failure before you have to be resilient, but going through research, going through maybe experiments that don't work out, and still deciding to continue, right? To me, that's a demonstration of resilience lah.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really a bit different. Like we have to pre-plan everything and preempt a lot of things. Otherwise, when we run out of money, it's really an endpoint.
Right. Speaking of which, right, so how have you both adapted your businesses to the current situation with COVID and the pessimistic outlook? Probably.
So for us, we're quite fortunate because we are still in R&D stage. After our fundraise a month ago, we are quite fortunate that we can continue our, just business as usual. But one thing I want to highlight is really the support from the Singapore government, Enterprise Singapore, Singapore Food Agency, A-Star. They have all been super supportive across the board. And because of that, our lab actually didn't have to shut down because of COVID. And in times where there are other food tech, biotech startups who are just hot behind our heels, it's extremely important for us to have used this time to accelerate our R&D. So we are very thankful for that.
That's great. Darius?
Cool. And I heard that during any crisis like COVID, the birth rate and the divorce rates always goes up, right? So you got bigger market.
Yeah.
10 months from now, there's going to be more babies, right? So
10 months.
Yeah. You have 10 months for your R&D to succeed.
Yeah, you got 10 months.
I'll tell my scientist that.
Hurry up.
No pressure.
For us, actually, we were quite scared
No
going
pressure,
into
guys.
COVID because we know the property market is definitely going to crash, and it did. So you take Singapore market as an example. March and April saw a 70% drop on transaction volume. April and May saw a 70% drop from March. And luckily in June, it kind of recovered as circuit breaker kind of start releases. But we were definitely concerned in terms of whether our business would even exist in such a climate. But what is interesting is that, even though there was lots of fires to fight and people had to work from home and we worked very hard to kind of drive a change, I think I'm proud to say that I think our team used the moment well. So a lot of the property owners, developers, property agents have a lot more time on their hand now. So we used the opportunity to drive the digital change, so-called digital change, where we actually, for example, our number of video listings, so listings with video of the apartment, has gone up by 30x. And the amount of time that people spend on each of these listings has gone up by 6x. And each of this listing is 3 times as likely to get an inquiry because essentially, since you can't go down for viewing, then a listing that has a video is a great replacement for that. It's not 100% replacement, but it's a good enough replacement for at least getting an inquiry through to ask a few questions and see whether this is a property you're interested in. So I think because of such efforts, I think we were able to quickly adapt to the environment. To be honest, long term, we actually predict that this is going to be much more beneficial for platforms like us, because consumers over time, and even during the next 2 years while COVID is still active, they don't really want to interact as much as possible in person. They would want to spend more time online for the viewings. So I think that has been quite positive for us. And I think fortunately it turns out that it did end up somehow. I also don't know how we managed it, but somehow Q2 ended up being 20% higher in revenue compared to Q1. Not sure how we did it, but somehow we managed. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I'm curious. So Jairus, when you guys entered that slump, right? How did you decide that we're going to try out videos? Or was it something that came from the market?
Yeah, no, actually, so video is something that we always had. The fortunate thing is that we didn't have to build a product for it. The product was always there. It's just that it's been silent and dead for a year since it's been there. We try to push as hard as possible especially for our agent industry to adopt it. And it's true also, because the ones who adopted it didn't find too much of a delta in terms of results. Because Singapore is so small, right? Like if you're a property buyer, you'd be just like, okay, I see the photos, it's good enough. Then it's like easy to make a trip to just go down rather than watch a video online and which is like 50% experience, you can go down for 100% experience. But I think for us, I think it's really that taking an existing product and quickly saying that, we got to take some bets. This is a time whereby the whole talk about being data-driven completely gets thrown out the window, right? It's like, what do you think people want? I think they want to watch video of a listings online. This is probably true. Okay, let's go market this to the agent and make sure that they put up videos, right? Like it's complete guesswork. And we just gambled on it and it kind of worked. And we further gambled on a live viewing feature, so the agents can actually now enable to say that I can actually, so this is post-circuit breaker. They are actually able to be in the unit, but if the buyer doesn't want to visit, they can request that I will do live viewing with you through WhatsApp live call or Facebook live video call and so on. So that has also taken off quite well in the last 1 month since we launched as well. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm curious, right? So what gives you both the strength to be resilient? Because it's so hard, right? Especially if you keep running into walls.
I guess this what founders sign up for, right? Founders, CEOs, that's what you sign up for. You have to be the last man standing. Like, if everybody is panicking, you have to pretend not to panic. Because if you panic, all hell breaks loose, right? So even if you're actually panicking, you still have to pretend not to panic. So because you're last man standing, right? That's the job requirement. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. There's no choice. Well, I guess for me, recently I watched a movie about Edison and Westinghouse. So they are the big electric providers when electricity first came out. And I'm not sure if, Robin, you're nodding your head. I think you've watched it. It was a really cool movie.
I got no time to watch TV.
So they talk about so you're talking about the time when electricity was invented, and you're talking about DC versus the AC current. And in that point in time, all these big inventions came out just after World War II. And both founders of DC and AC, they were very resilient. They managed to push through their inventions despite the not so good times. And at the end of the whole light bulb thing, like Edison was saying, there might come a time when only the rich people will burn candles to see light. So it was quite impactful for me. There will come a time when it doesn't make sense to do things the way we did before. And I guess as founders, this is what our aim is and our dream is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
For every invention of a light bulb, there is a premium candle company being made.
Yeah, and those things are expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
$40. Right. No, but don't you think it's hard? Like, how do you choose to believe that, I can find this? Especially from you are creating cell-based breast milk, right? And then this has not been done before. How do you know that you can do it?
So the fact that it hasn't been done before is more like there is no business out there who has done it before, but bits and pieces of the technology has been done before. So there are certain pieces of literature that says certain methods of our whole process has been done before. So we are really piecing different technologies together, stringing it together, optimizing it, and going out to market with it. And because, there's several different things, right? It's really timing. It's all about timing. It's about being in Singapore, having the support of the government, hitting a point in time when technology is able to support what we really want to do. So all these different points are kind of converging at this point in time, which is why I feel like door after door opening is something that can happen.
Okay, great. Given the current landscape, right, I just want us to end the panel with a bit of encouragement and optimism for all the founders and investors out there. So what words of encouragement would you give to our fellow founders who are maybe struggling right now or trying to figure out what to do next? Let's start with Darius.
Words of encouragement. I'm a very
I don't
encouraging person.
Yeah, it's so harsh. Okay, maybe you can present.
How about I give two sides of the coin? So
Okay,
on the bright side of the coin, I would say that to fellow founders, and then this is my experience, humbly, my 2 cents. Yeah, I think startups are naturally advantaged to any crisis because A, we are faster, we are more agile, and B, we are more decisive, we are a flatter organization. And C, we have nothing to lose. Relatively, right? A new digital camera startup has nothing to lose compared to Kodak, who has a $2 billion business to lose. So, big use of it. I think there's a great opportunity, a crisis that if you don't know what to do, your competitor or better your incumbent is even more panicking. So this is awesome. So that's the good side of it. The bad side of it, I would say, if you need encouragement, then I would say, then suck it up lah. This is the job you signed up for. So sorry, I don't think you need encouragement. You're a founder, so you just have to do what you need to do. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with Darius. But I guess for us, this is not just advice for other people, but this is what we're doing as well. Like we hyper-focus on what's valuable to the business, what's important, and then see what we can cut out. We just cut it out. So we need to stay hyper-focus and make sure that we have enough runway for the next 12 to 18 months. And also, don't stop learning. The team is using this time to learn from everyone. And we want to make use of every opportunity to extract the most value out of every single meeting that we go to, every discussion. So yeah, these are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thanks, Feng-Ru and Darius, for taking time, and everyone for joining us today. I'll hand the time back to Yvonne.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, guys.
Well, Robin, Feng-Ru, and Darius, thank you. I really enjoyed that session, especially the very candid and inspired sharing from Feng-Ru and Darius. That was really enjoyable. So thank you once again. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's Switch breakout session, as well as the end of the global launch event. But the conversation doesn't stop here. Please do continue to keep in touch with us on social media, and you can find out more information at SFF and Switch 2020 at our website. We also have a quick poll for you that's available on your screen right now for you to tell us how we did today. Once again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. And do remember to save the date for SFF and Switch 2020, and that's happening from the 7th to the 11th of December. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great week ahead and stay safe.